There was like a couple of times where I completely blacked out, like right before I quit drinking, where I was like, really scared myself. And I was like, yikes, like I really need to get my shit together and completely stop this once and for all. And I honestly didn't think that I could do it because I had had nights where maybe I went out to a party and I wasn't drinking, but I would have still one or two drinks. Like I couldn't not have one or two drinks.
Healing was the warm-up. This is the main fucking event. Welcome to Go Regulate Yourself, the unapologetic, unfiltered love letter you didn't know you needed. This is where mental health meets real life, where growth gets gritty, and where we stop pretending healing makes us saints. Think of it like therapy with tequila shots and a side of tough love. In this space, we're learning how to take responsibility for our shit, face the chaos of life, and become the best version of who we are. So if you're ready for your weekly "what the fuck am I doing" moment, let's dive in. Sarah is a somatic facilitator who helps women stop choosing emotionally unavailable men by healing the deep unconscious patterns that keep them stuck, looping in the same relationship cycles. Rather than focusing on mindset alone, she guides women through deep nervous system and identity level transformation so that they naturally lose their attraction to unhealthy dynamics and start magnetizing relationships that are safe, reciprocal, and secure. Her work helps women become the kind of woman who knows her worth, trusts herself completely, and settles for nothing less than the love she truly desires. Now, this episode was so much fun to record. Sarah is an absolute gem with so much insight and wisdom towards going through so many different life challenges. And I really do believe that you are going to get so much out of today's episode. So without further ado, let's dive on in. Hello, Reg Babes, and welcome back to another Fridays with Friends on the Go Regulate Yourself podcast. My name is Brianne. I am your host, and today we are back for a very juicy episode. My guest today is Sarah. Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm doing so good. Very grateful and happy to be here.
Amazing. I am so excited to have you on today. I know that our conversation is going to dig up a lot, I'm sure, not just for us as we go through this, but also for our listeners who are present on the other side of this podcast. I know that we're going to get into some really good stuff, and I cannot wait for that. But before we actually dive into the whole premise of why we're here, I have a question that I love to ask every guest, which is, what does the word regulate mean to you? Would you mind giving us your own definition of that?
Yes, absolutely. So to me, being regulated means having that baseline of safety that I can get activated, I can have big feelings, I can do things that are uncomfortable, and I have that baseline of safety to come back to that, I can self-soothe. I don't need to reach out to somebody else. Like I used to be very anxiously attached. So I used to really need to reach out to others to find that safety in myself. So yeah, it's really having that baseline of safety in the nervous system.
I love how you said safety within yourself, because I think we all have those points in our journey where we do go outside of ourselves, whether we're seeking something, whether it's happiness, etc., or it is that feeling of safety. We often are trying to either project or get that validation for things that are occurring within us. And obviously, big emotions are part of the human experience. We want to allow ourselves to really feel those to the full depth and to be able to be safe within that experience as well. So I love that definition. Now, for our audience who doesn't already know who you are, can you take a moment to introduce yourself? Let us know a little bit about you, where you're from, what you do, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a small town in Quebec called Saint Lazare, and I grew up in a very religious family, um, big family, lots of siblings. And I moved to Alberta when I was 17 with most of my family. And yeah, really went through some big life changes as a teenager. Um, had a big falling out with the church back home, and that was pretty traumatizing. It felt kind of like a big betrayal. Not sure if we'll be getting into that today, but yeah, a lot of betrayal, a lot of big changes as a teenager, moving over here, starting over, and finishing my last year of high school here, and ended up going into the trades, working as a plumber for 12 years, and then finally started my own business doing somatic work. And I use that somatic work now to help women who are done abandoning themselves. And like I said, I that foundation of safety to me is, really the foundation of all of my work. Like we can't do that healing work if we can't have that foundation of safety first. So I help my clients by helping them feel connected and safe in their bodies and to be able to rewire their nervous system so that they can sit through that discomfort and they can have the courage to leave toxic relationships if they need to, and to be able to sit in the discomfort of setting boundaries and, all of the big emotions that come up when we need to walk away from these situations or we need to set the boundaries. And and then I help them build the self-worth and the self-love so that they don't continue to choose those kinds of relationships with people, and they can start to call in that healthy love. And then finally, the self-trust piece, which is so important. I think that we are all such intuitive beings, but being able to trust that intuition is a whole other thing. So yeah, I love to be able to take my clients through all those things and to help them create a life that feels happy and free and whole and just all of the good things. So yeah, that's kind of me. That's where I came from. That's what I do in a nutshell.
I love it so much. And there is literally so much that I want to touch on from your journey and everything that brought you into this point, and especially what you're doing, the work that you do now in order to help women heal and get to a place where they are thriving in their lives instead of merely just surviving. But before we dive into all of that goodness, I really want to take it back to the beginning and talk about like setting the stage for what led you to this place in your life. So would you mind taking us all the way back to childhood and talking through us like what was the experience of growing up like for you? And in that, where was there supposed to be this sense of safety that you didn't actually receive? Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. Well, my parents, I don't feel were very emotionally connected to us. I feel like my dad was very wrapped up in his work, and he actually has a lot of anxiety. He always has. And it's funny now that I'm, so different now. I look at him and I'm like, oh, that's where I got it from. So I think that playing a huge part, not being chosen by my father in a sense, and not feeling important, not feeling like you matter. And my mom, when we were younger, she kind of had a bit of an emotional wall up, so I never felt like I could share anything that I was going through with my parents. And I did have my little sister. We were very close, and that's great, but they're kids, right? Like they're not helping you move through the emotional trauma and all the things that you experience. So all of the trauma that I did experience as a child, whether that be like big, small, whatever, I went through all of that by myself. And so as I got older and these issues weren't dealt with, I feel like that trauma really starts to compound. I felt a lot of anger in regards to the religious upbringing because it felt very much like, it's our way or the highway kind of thing. Very like kind of like a dictatorship almost, like you have to follow this way or you're going to be in trouble, basically. And I felt such this deep sense of, I don't know, like being misunderstood and not, I didn't feel like I was able to have my own voice, my own beliefs, my own opinions. And growing up, like now in hindsight, when I look back and I've tapped into all of these like feminine disciples, and I'm like, no wonder I had so much anger towards men too, because I was like, there's so much female leadership that was missing from that. So there was so many, all these different layers of anger and just feeling confined in a box and being left to deal with all of these things and all these emotions alone. And I remember feeling like when I was a kid, like when I was a young teenager, being so excited at the possibility of having a boyfriend because I just so badly wanted to feel loved. And I didn't feel that growing up. And so that was kind of what set the stage for me to continue on and to really continue hurting myself more and more over the years, like as I went into adulthood.
I find this so interesting and fascinating because a large percentage of the work that you do now, as you said, starts on this foundation of safety and creating this. And as you've described through your journey, when you don't have something, we're often trying to create or seek it, especially outside of ourselves. And so I'm curious for you, not having a lot of safety in the masculine, did you feel like you became the masculine in your own life? Does that resonate with you? And if so, when did you first kind of recognize that pattern?
Totally. I probably didn't recognize that pattern until like this last year, to be honest. I was so in it. Um, I always was kind of a tomboy, and I do think that that is really a part of my personality. But looking back, I can see that me being a tomboy and me hanging out with mostly boys all the time and always saying to myself that I got along better with boys was me actually trying to feel like I really was desired. And like, when you hang out with all the boys and they're like, oh, Sarah's like one of the bros, you feel like you're like, oh, I'm chosen, It's like this small kind of piece of being chosen. And so I really started to act like that when I was a teenager. And I remember like when I was a kid, I used to do stuff and my dad would say like, oh, that's not very ladylike. And just was so rebellious that that probably drove that as well. And it's not really a coincidence to me when I see that I chose to work in the trades and chose to be a plumber. I definitely like growing up after moving out, I was in a relationship with my daughter's dad for um the start of my adulthood until I was 24. So I wasn't independent then, but when we split up, I became very independent and, I bought my own house and I, I always took care of myself. So I've always had that, like, I do think that there is a side of that that is very much toxic masculine. Like, I need to be on my own. I need to do everything on my own. But then I do think that there is another side of it where there's an empowering piece where I I feel that it is empowering to be independent, but there is that middle ground, right? Whereas I have found that now, or I am working on finding that now. And before it was very much like, no, I can do this. Like I got to take care of myself.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that goes without saying, like for everything in our lives, right? We usually, if we're on one far side of the pendulum of not having anything in our experience, like a total lack without, the natural reaction for most of us is generally to swing that pendulum so far to the other side that we're like at the opposite extreme. And so here we are, maybe in that toxic masculinity where we are trying so desperately to create something that we go overboard. And it's like over the years, you've kind of
Hmm.
allowed yourself to settle in this middle ground of like being equally balanced. And masculine energy in itself, obviously, right, is not toxic. It's not a bad thing. It's actually really
Yes.
beneficial to us in so many ways. But when we're either in the lack or in the overdrive, that's when we're creating these problems for ourselves. And we need to blend that with the feminine and be able to find that balance within. And that is going to look differently, I think, for each of us in relation to how that shows up and how we allow it to
Yeah.
operate within our lives. Because I know, and I'm speaking to my own journey especially, I definitely went overdrive in the masculine for a really long time, and it created so many problems for me. And just that hustle mentality and like that hyper independence of not allowing anybody to step in and, take care of me. And I made a lot of really poor decisions in my own life as a result. And there was a lot of challenges that I had to work through to get to the balance point that I'm at now. And I know your journey is very similar in that because you
Hmm.
briefly mentioned to me we had some toxic relationships. You were in ultimately a career that you did not enjoy, perhaps even hated. And then you also had some coping with substances. So would you mind walking us through kind of the years before you allowed yourself to find this balance? What did that actually look like for you? Can you talk to some of the experiences in adulthood and like how that actually showed up?
Yeah. As you're talking, like, the whole hustle mentality was very much driven into you, especially working in the trades. I can't tell you how many times I've heard like, you know, I'll sleep when I'm dead and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And everybody's working so hard. And there was a lot in my career, especially as a woman working in the trades, feeling like I had to prove myself. So for the first, I want to say like 3, 4, 5 years of my career, there was always that like hustle to prove that I'm worthy of this job that is, I'm working in a man's world. So that always was kind of, even after I did prove myself, that was always underneath the surface. And I want to say, like I mentioned at the beginning, that trauma that kind of went unchecked started to kind of get worse and worse as I got older. Um, I I I really was searching for a purpose and meaning to my life. And when I had my daughter, I thought that that was going to bring my meaning and my purpose. And while it did bring me, you know, a lot of meaning, it wasn't my main life's purpose. So I still felt like I was seeking that. And throughout this career of plumbing, at first it felt good. Like the first few years, I was like, I'm proving myself. I'm like doing well in a man's world. So that felt fulfilling for a short amount of time, but it was very surface level. So that feeling faded quickly. And over the years of living in misalignment, with my career and then dating men who were not good to me. They were very good to me and they're also very not good to me. I think that's very often how these toxic relationships go. I became more and more and more anxious and more depressed, over the years. And eventually, I never was even really a big drinker when I was younger. I didn't really start partying hard until I was like 25. And I am grateful for my daughter because I think that if it wasn't for her, I maybe would have gone off the deep end, but I always kept it in check because, I had her every other week. So I was like on and off party girl. But with the partying pushed it even further because when you're staying up late and you're doing drugs and you're drinking, like there was so many Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays where like I would say like I felt like I was on suicide watch because I was in such a low place. And so the drinking and the drugs, like that really took it to the next level for me. But what it also did was it distracted me even further from my purpose. It made
Mm-hmm.
everything so cloudy that I was just kind of on a loop. I was just kind of repeating the same patterns over and over again, and I was very stuck. And eventually I stepped away from the drug side of things, but I continued to drink and party. And then I started to date somebody who was very unhealthy for me and pulled me even deeper into all of that stuff again. But what that did was it triggered me to finally say, like, this is too much. Like, I need to put a stop to this. It pushed me so far into such a deep and low place. That was like towards the end of my plumbing career where I was so, so deeply unhappy and the relationship was not good. And I finally had to quit drinking altogether and, healed my relationship with alcohol. I do drink now, but few and far between. Like I'm not the same person I used to be. And it kind of took everything getting so bad. Like I really went to rock bottom to feel like I had no other choice but to quit drinking and to quit plumbing and to get my life together. So it kind of, it didn't happen all at the same time. It was over the years. First, I quit drinking, and then I quit plumbing, and then I started my business, and then finally I was able to leave that relationship. And so yeah, it's been a hard road, and so that's why I am so passionate about helping people, because I'm like, if I had someone like me now to help, me and when I was 18, 19, 20, like wow, would my life ever look so different. So
Mm.
yeah, that was a long story, but I hope that
It's
answers your
perfect.
question.
It sure does. And I would love to know more about the moment where enough became enough. I have a few more questions I want to go back into in relation to your journey, but just at this point, was this one huge catastrophic moment that opened your eyes and you're like, okay, I'm changing, I'm doing things differently, I am getting in control of my life? Or was it like a gradual awareness of things starting to go wrong and or feeling really heavy that eventually opened your eyes? Like what actually led to those moments of stopping the drugs and then stopping drinking and kind of going into that healing cycle?
Yeah, I would say that like first off, like getting away from the crowd that I was hanging out with, I had stopped hanging out with certain people that I knew would be doing certain things. And, then when I had to take it the next step and stop drinking, that was really a long journey. That was a very long time of me being like, I don't like who I'm becoming. I was starting to drink more and more and heavier and heavier. And that was never really who I was. Like, I was never, like, sure, I partied a lot, but I wasn't a heavy drinker. And so it was a long progression of, I was actually seeing a therapist, and I was seeing a therapist, and we had been talking about it for a while. And then there was like a couple of times where I completely blacked out, like right before I quit drinking, where I was like, really scared myself. And I was like, yikes, like I really need to get my shit together and completely stop this once and for all. And I honestly didn't think that I could do it because I'd had nights where maybe I went out to a party and I wasn't drinking, but I would have still one or two drinks. Like I couldn't not have one or two drinks. And I remember I went to a party one night and I planned to not drink. And it was like 11 o'clock and I hadn't drank. And then that temptation came and I was like, I really want to drink, but I was like, it's 11. I think I had to leave at like 1. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Get hammered right now? And then, like, you know what I mean? It's like kind of pointless at this point. And so I didn't drink and I went home and I was like so proud of myself. I can't even explain the feeling of pride that I felt with myself that I was able to do that. And that was honestly the catalyst for a lot more change to happen in my life, I think, because I I cultivated this layer of self-trust in myself that I had never felt before. And I felt like I was unstoppable. I felt like I could do anything that I put my mind to at that point. So yeah, long progression, but there's definitely a couple of nights where I was like, yikes.
Hey, I can resonate very deeply with that. I actually was having a conversation with someone in my life just recently about this, and I said, I too still drink, but I am a very different person, as you said, with the relationship that I have with alcohol and what I allow myself to do versus what I don't allow myself to do anymore. And I had to go through this really deep healing cycle where I completely cut out alcohol for a while because I was
Yeah.
blackout every single time that I drank. And it was a way of avoiding a lot of things that were going on within me with the healing and all of the things that were required. And
I think most of us, truthfully, go through this point with alcohol or some kind of coping mechanism in our life where we're using it as a way to escape and be able to divert our attention to something else. And eventually, whatever that moment is that opens our eyes to it, which hopefully we all do have at some point, we realize how bad things are getting, and we actually start to do that work on ourselves and explore why we are using certain things as we are using them. Because I truly don't believe anything on this planet is quote unquote evil or necessarily a poison
Yeah.
or anything like that. I think it is in relation to the intention and the purpose in which we are using something. And we can use anything as a coping mechanism that can be an unhealthy relationship, but we have to allow ourselves to recognize how we are actually using that in our own life. And so I really
Yeah.
appreciate your vulnerability in relation to that share. I think it's so important for our audience to see that this is an experience that is common and something that a lot of us go through and sometimes is required in order for us to get to that other side, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. And, looking back too, I do also want to speak on something that I can see now is that desire to belong. Like my Chiron is in Cancer, so I have the wound of belonging. And drinking with all of these people gave me this false sense of belonging. And so
Mm.
a big part of stopping all of that was kind of walking away from all those people, or at least putting some distance between myself and them, and no longer feeling like I was part of a family in that sort of sense. So that was also an added element that did make it very hard. And I do think, a lot of people have, their group of people that they go out with, and that's the friend group that they've developed for so long. So now to be able to change your life, you're not only changing your drinking habits, but you're also potentially losing a whole circle of friends. And that's really, really, really hard, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's terrifying because you're walking away from literally everything that you have known to be your life and your place within it. Everything shifts and changes. And I think, truthfully, you're right. That is the scariest and the hardest part because it is like starting from the ground up. Now we're rebuilding every single piece of our life. But as scary as it is, it is also empowering in a way because we're actually choosing the pieces that we want to fulfill our life moving forward from the right energy, the right purpose, the right intention. But we have to be willing to surrender and let go of all of those things that we've been holding on until this point. And that part is never easy. I'm
Yeah.
curious to walk it back a little bit because I need to know a little bit more just about like the trade space of this place that you ended up in for a little while. So my first question is like how did you actually end up in plumbing as your choice for a trade? Because when you think of a woman, that's not typically a trade that we would enter into. As you said, it's a very male dominated industry. So, what actually led you to moving into plumbing, and what was that experience actually like for you within that career?
Hey, Reg Babe, have you heard the news? Go Regulate Yourself is coming to you live and in person. That's right, we have the first live podcast event happening in Edmonton, Alberta this September. Join us at the Orange Hub Theatre on September 25th with a live audience where we are interviewing 4 incredibly impactful speakers on what it takes to overcome shame, heal the hard stuff that you've been through in your life, and come out on top. Tickets are on sale right now, and until August 9th, you can grab our early bird pricing for a low rate of $54.99. You can get yours by heading to goregulateyourself.com and clicking the live event tab at the top of the screen. We cannot wait to see you there, and don't forget to go regulate yourself.
Yes, I've been asked this question a million times. Everyone wants to know, so it's a great question. So when I had my daughter, I was serving for a little bit, and I obviously didn't want to have to give up my evenings and weekends. So I started working for a company that I knew somebody that was working at, and we were building trailers for like work camps. And so there was pretty much every, main skilled trades working there. So I labored for a little while, and I had the choice to, continue laboring or choose a trade and get like a $5 an hour raise, and they were going to pay for your schooling and they would subsidize your wage while you were in school. So it was a no-brainer for me to choose a trade. And my daughter's dad was an electrician. And I think I was friends with some of the plumbers. So I was like, I'll be a plumber. It really wasn't like, oh, I need to be a plumber. Like, I really want to be a plumber. I actually was in school for interior design at the time in the evenings. And that's what I thought I wanted to do. And I ended up, what you do in the trades is you work for 10 months and then you go to school for 2 months and then same thing for 4 years. And so I remember when I first went to plumbing school, and even though it was challenging, I felt like so many, like all the subjects made sense because they were like applicable to like what I was doing. And I remember when I went to plumbing school, I felt so good. I was like, I'm good at this. Like I was good at what I did. I was good at the schooling, and that felt so good and fulfilling to me. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to drop the interior design and this is what I'm going to do instead. And that's really how I ended up there. It was kind of like a happenstance. It was like one
Hmm.
thing led to the next, led to the next. And when I first started in plumbing, like when I took my first year of school, um, in my early 20s, I was like the only girl in the entire school. Our campus was, so for those of you who are in Edmonton, I don't know where all the listeners are from, but Nate, the main campus is downtown, but our campus was only men. So that was fun. I was the only girl in school. The whole school pretty much, and that was quite the experience. You literally feel like you're walking through a men's prison. I don't know why men are so weird, but yeah. And by the time I got my journeyman ticket, and like by the time I went out of plumbing, there's actually so many more women in the trade, which is amazing. But yeah, back in the day, especially plumbing in general, you see a lot more female electricians, but not as many female plumbers. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay, this is a wild. I can't believe that you were the only female in the school. Like that is insane to me. And it also leads me into wanting to know more about like your feminine presence then within the workplace, because as you said, like it was already a weird enough dynamic being in the school, being the only female. What about like on work sites? Because I'm sure at this time, you, as you said, you're kind of in the overdrive of masculine. Like there's a lot of that coming through where you're one of the boys in your friend groups and things like that. But I'm sure there was moments where like your femininity slipped through the mask, and that might have been shown in some ways or some places. So when that happened, was there a like difference in the energy of the men around you? Did they respond differently? Did they treat you differently? How did that play into your role within this?
Yeah. And let me know if I got the context of your question right. But when I was at school, it was very uncomfortable, but on the job site, it was actually quite a different experience. Um, I felt like men were way more respectful and they acted way more normal. I don't know why school was so different, but I definitely had very many experiences over the course of the years where men would either ask me out, which happened way less than you would expect, but where I got asked out or where I was like sexually harassed by men. But that was honestly very few and far between. Almost every single man that I ever worked with was very respectful of me and yeah, treated me very well. So I was actually,
Mm.
it wasn't nearly as bad as you think it would be.
Well, that's
Yeah.
incredible. I'm glad to hear that, at least in basing that experience, because a lot of times when we see these dynamics of when the masculine and the feminine is not offset in an equal balance, there can be a lot more toxicity or disruption that occurs at that level. And it's actually really relieving to know that there wasn't a lot of experiences like that for you, and it was something that was maybe more easily to manage. And perhaps it had to do with how you carried yourself in those environments too, right? Of allowing
I
yourself
do think
to
so.
like, yeah, being protective and creating that self safety. It probably had a big factor in that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so, for sure.
Okay, so I want to know when you talked about feeling stuck and out of place, what parts exactly were you referring to? Was it specifically in relation to like where you were in your career? Was it where you were in your relationships? Was it where you were in your life? Like, what parts of you felt stuck and out of place before things changed?
Um, I would say like out of place being just that just working on job sites all the time, just not really my thing. Like
Mm.
when anytime I have to like drive by a job site or whatever, I'm like, ugh, like so much of the time you're like windows are tarped over and you're working in the dark. Like I've worked in so many places where you're working in the dark all the time or whatever. Like just so not how do I describe it? It's like it's
Aesthetic.
just so it's not pretty. Yeah, aesthetic. Yeah, exactly. It's not aesthetic at all. And it's really like, it's kind of depressing. Like I can't remember what aspect of my human design this is, but my environment that I'm supposed to be in is like somewhere with a view. So especially to be
Mm.
like, working in cinder block like prisons, basically, like a lot of these jobs, we're like so just not aligned with like what I'm supposed like environment that I'm supposed to be working in. So, I didn't know that at the time, but it makes a lot of sense now. And just the atmospheres, like a lot of the job sites that I worked on were like very unsafe and um I wasn't always a lot of the time I was working with people I didn't like, so it was like just so much stuff out of alignment that didn't feel good. And the feeling stuck part, the hugest thing for me was that I felt like I didn't know what I was supposed to do with my life. And secondly, I didn't know how I was supposed to start over. I owned my own home by myself. I had a mortgage to pay. So I was like, every time I thought of something, I wanted to be a psychologist. That was always like a thought of mine. I always knew that I wanted to help people heal, but I didn't even allow myself to go there for a very long time um when I quit like my commercial job plumbing. I started taking psychology classes finally, but there were so many years where I was so discouraged by the price tag and the amount of time that I would have to put in before I got to quit plumbing. I was like, I
Mm.
can't wait that many years. Like I just felt like I was so done. I was like, I literally can't wait. So I kept kind of just like spinning my wheels, feeling like, okay, I can't wait, but now I don't know what I'm supposed to do that I'm going to be able to do like now. And so I just felt so stuck and financially was really the worst part. And when I did finally quit and I quit my commercial job plumbing and I started working for a friend plumbing. So that took a lot of pressure off. It made my life a lot easier, but I still didn't love it, but it allowed me to have a little bit more freedom. I started taking psychology classes and there was just something like the spiritual aspect was missing for me. And then that's when I found somatics later. I was like, oh, this is what I'm meant to do. Like it's the bridge between science and spirituality for me. So yeah, that was way more aligned.
I can see so. I mean, I feel like too, as we all go through these patterns of moving away from like heavy and the masculine to allowing more of this femininity to take place, it is some of like that aesthetic, like that vibe energy where we're allowing like the pretty parts of our life to really shine through. And I know I was that way for a long time, and I can even imagine this being so much more prevalent for you as you were in school for interior design. So it's like it's a really big part of who you
Yeah,
are and what
right.
you're creating for your life. And then here you are in these cinder block camps of like creating stuff, and you're like, oh, it's like mud and dirt and like men around. It's not the same
Yeah.
vibe at all. So I definitely understand that. And I also understand too the financial implications of like keeping us stuck, because I think when I talk to like my listeners, our audience, and we have these conversations, and back when I was doing coaching as well, predominantly for most women, the biggest factor preventing us from really like going all in and taking the risk of whatever it is that we want to do, whatever it is that we want to create, is usually finances and not knowing how we're going to create an income or how we're going to create the stability for ourselves moving forward. And it's so interesting for me to like witness my own journey in this, because I look back and I'm like, you know, in the moments where I thought I was doing so good and I like was working really long days and I was hustling and grinding and like not taking care of myself in any way, my income was actually so much lower than it is when I'm living a life of alignment, like choosing what it is that I want to do every day and having this open ended schedule and lots of breaks and lots of rest time and lots of play time. But it takes like these slow, consistent steps for us to get to that point in our life. We can't just walk away from everything
Yeah.
and suddenly our life is drastically different. I always say, you know, it's not just one big step that gets us there, it's a million little steps along the way. And I think what you're describing in relation to your journey is proof of this exact concept where you started recognizing one thing wasn't serving you, you let that go, you shifted a friend group, you
Mm-hmm.
changed these things that you were doing, and eventually it led you to this point where you're living this aesthetically pleasing, very in alignment type of life. And so I'm curious, coming from this perception of like, since you said you always knew that you wanted to get into the work of healing people, you wanted to be a psychologist, there was different things on the radar prior to the work that you do now. What were the steps that actually led you into this? Like, can you speak to us of like the first download or the first aha, the first moment where you're like, this is the step that I'm going to take. This is my purpose. This is what I'm going to do moving forward.
Yeah. So first of all, I think that it was taking the step to, quit my career and to seek something different. Taking the step to, I did take my yoga teacher training as well
Mm-hmm.
during those years. That was also a stepping stone for me, I feel. Um, Taking the psychology class, even though I didn't end up going through, like I only took one class, I think that taking the steps, even if you don't know where you're going, starts to pave the way and it shows the universe like I'm ready for change. Like I'm ready for what's next. Like I'm taking the actions whether or not I know where I'm going. And honestly, like when it came to the somatic stuff, I I think I was just like scrolling on Instagram and I saw somebody talking about it and I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even understand it. And I saw it and I knew that I needed to do it. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I have to do this. And so it's very interesting to me because I always say that like the modality isn't necessarily important, but now
Mm-hmm.
that I've had astrology readings, it's so aligned that I chose somatic work. Like it's very much like to my soul's blueprint. So even though sometimes you think things are like, just a happenstance or not a mistake, but like it just, wasn't necessarily intentional, but it actually was, you just didn't consciously know it, but your subconscious did.
I couldn't agree more with that. I look back all the time and I'm like, why did I have to go into nursing, right? And spend so much of my life in that area. And then I look back and I'm like, okay, there's so much that I learned through that process of not just the school and being in that environment, but what it eventually led me to in understanding in business and life and my own makeup and how I show up in the world. There is a lot of benefits that come from even the things that seem like they were a waste of time in our journey. There is some kind of guidance, some silver lining that ends up being there that we never would have gotten to the place that we're at in our life without that piece of the puzzle. So I really appreciate
Yeah.
that perspective. And I want to know too, based on kind of where you were versus where you are now, can you talk to us maybe about how your perception of femininity has shifted? Because I'm sure from when you were back in like the toxic relationships and you were in this deep, deep, deep wound cycle, your definition of femininity from then has probably shifted drastically from what it is now. So would you mind talking to us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. Something that I've really recently kind of had a big aha moment on too was what happens when we drop that need to prove and that like living for survival. Because a lot of my life I was like, yes, I made good money back in the day, but then even during my last years of plumbing, I wasn't making as much money. And during my first couple years of my business, I didn't have a lot of money. And so I was constantly working to survive, working to prove all the time. And when I started over and I sold my house and I downsized my finances like crazy, everything shifted for me. And I swung, like you said at the beginning, very far to the other side of the pendulum where I was like, I'm just gonna lay around and not really do anything and just like let things come to me and all this stuff. And so I actually had to find that balance, but not only find that balance, but instead of having that drive to survive, I now had to tap back into desire and what I'm passionate about, which I do feel like is a very feminine thing. You know, I think that women and men are wired differently, and women are wired to work towards desire. And that when we're working to survive, to make ends meet, we're not living in our feminine um, alignment, right? So to me, it's like having that balance between the two, being able to um, be structured and have discipline and all these things, but still lean into my other side. I think that, you know, just based on who I am as a person, I will always have those very like masculine traits. I'm like a strong woman, and I know a lot of women are like that. And I think that when you come into the spiritual world, there's a lot of rhetoric around like, oh, you want to be like soft and feminine and all this stuff. And while I do feel like even just holding space for people in my somatic work, I've tapped into that softness a lot more, into a side of myself that I did not know. Um, that strong side really comes in. It's very important to me to have that strong, you know, sense of safety, or sense of when someone's holding you, you want to feel like they can hold you. You want to feel like they're strong enough, you know? So to me, it's really that balance of the two. And the most important thing is like working towards that desire. Because that there was a period of time where I was like, what am I doing again? You know, we get like lost in the pathway of taking the steps, and the steps they're not always fun. They can be a little bit laborious. And when you don't have that dangling carrot of like desire in front of you, then what are you really working for, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. Like, what's the point? Like, what is actually filling you up and fueling you every single day? What's that driving force behind what you're doing? Because if you're just doing it to do it, like, again, we're lacking intention, we're lacking purpose in relation to what we're doing. And eventually we're going to get bored. Eventually we're going to burn out. Eventually we're going to get tired and want to burn it all down and start something else. Right. And so it's like figuring out
Mm-hmm.
what can kindle that fire for like a long period of time, right? We're not just looking for that temporary desire, that lust. We're looking for that true, like, what
Yeah.
is the purpose behind what I'm doing? And, you know, as you spoke to that, I'm like, yeah, damn, you're hitting the nail on the head, because I feel like in my own journey, that has been something I've had to find for myself and be able to come back to every single day in terms of the steps that I'm taking in the direction that I'm headed. And I think truthfully, that really is the secret to success for us in relation to what it is that we want to create in this world. We're never going to get to that end result. We're never going to create the things that we want to create unless we're able to do it from a place of stability, balance, groundedness, and the love and or passion for that thing. If we're consistently trying to create something out of lack, as we know, laws of the universe, we're going to continue to attract in the lack, and it's not going to go the direction we want it to. So I think that was some potent advice. And I want to spin off of this then, asking you, because obviously we talked about like when the pendulums were swinging too far to the outside in relation to the lack and or the overdrive of the masculine energy. How have you been able to balance the masculine in your day-to-day life now? Not talking about how you're there for clients, but specifically for you, how do you show up every single day that is this balance of the masculine? Would you share a little bit of that with us?
Mm, I would love to. I actually was moving through some of this for myself personally over the weekend. I think that when you do have that shift between survival and working towards desire, um, it's amazing and it's great, and it's kind of a weird space. It's like a weird integration, but that doesn't mean that all of the old patterns and all the old feelings are just gone like that, because you don't have to work to survive anymore. And something that I've noticed as I've started to step back into that more of a balanced state where, yes, I have flow, but I also have a lot of discipline, I start to notice those patterns coming back up inside of me. And so I sat with myself and I really, I was like, hey, what is this feeling that I have? It's like this pressure in my chest. And I just took some time to honestly sit with myself and I was like, what am I actually feeling here? And it was like, it's, there's so many different things wrapped into one, but really the biggest thing is that I'm putting pressure on myself to be perfect, and I'm putting pressure on myself to have things done within a certain amount of time, and or I'm putting pressure on myself to finish things like now instead of just, doing what I need to do and not going the whole extra mile every single time because I know that's going to lead me back to burnout again. So, something that I was really reflecting on was like the fact that I used to think that in order to be an embodied healer that I had to do, long somatic sessions for myself. And I was reminded this weekend, I was like, this is how you are an embodied leader in your space, is you make it a part of your life. I can now sit and say, hey, like I'm feeling pressure in my chest. Like, let me sit down and like sit with this and give it what it needs. So to me, it's like it takes a long, long time to heal those deep patterns. And that's something that I am still working on. I do still feel that pressure, but I have the awareness now where I can say, like, it's okay, I'm safe. Like, we don't have to rush. You have lots of time. So, yeah.
I love that so much because I feel that this is like what we talk about when we say, creating emotional intelligence, creating intelligence of the body and our nervous system and what we need and the true basis of regulation, if we will. We are learning like what our body needs in every single moment. And in that space of both not rushing to move through it quickly, but also not holding on to it and demanding that emotion stays with us forever, right? Allowing it to heal and to release and to move on and be able to shift to a different place. And I think that balance that you just described is what most of us are seeking in our lives, is to get to that point where this does just feel so natural to us, where we're able to shift, we're able to pivot, we're able to go through the emotions and the hormone cycles and all the things that we experience on a day-to-day basis in this beautiful thing called life. But it doesn't just happen overnight, right? We talk about when we go to the gym and we're looking to get in shape and tone up, it makes sense to us that we have to repeat that practice, that we have to continue to go there to lift the weights, to do the repetitions and repeat it in order to get those muscles. It just makes sense. But when we think about emotions and we think about regulation and we think about the nervous system, for some reason, we're so quick to beat ourselves up and be like, why the fuck am I not over this now? Why is it still bothering me? Why am I still dealing with this? And we don't necessarily have that patience or that understanding that that is also a muscle in a way that we have to continue to show up for. We have to practice. We have to just be able to repeat those actions, whether it is a specific tool that we like that we're using, or it's just a practice and an embodiment piece, whatever it might be, it does require that consistency and that effort to keep showing up in order to actually get the results that we're desiring. And so flipping this over to you now in relation to the work that you do, can you talk to us about how you're able to inspire, motivate, heal women in the work that you do? Can you share when a woman comes to you, like what is she struggling with and what is the process that you walk her through to get to this balanced place in her life?
Yes, absolutely. One thing I did just want to throw in there as well too is that learning how to live according to my cycle has been a huge, huge game changer when it comes to finding that balance between the two. Resting during my luteal phase, life changing. Life changing.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So typically what I see when people come to me is that one, they're not feeling safe in their bodies. They're not feeling safe in their nervous systems. And their need to be chosen or their need to be in connection overrides everything else. So it overrides the intuition, like I mentioned at the beginning. It overrides, that need for real safety. And so what the steps that I take people through is kind of like I said at the beginning, like first and foremost is teaching that their nervous system how to be able to flow between activation and deactivation. That's what I'm doing in sessions. And for a lot of people, one of the biggest things is learning how to feel peace in your body, learning how to feel joy, learning how to feel love, learning what self-trust feels like in your body, learning what intuition feels like, because when you're so disconnected from yourself and you're so wrapped up in these situations or relationships that are so draining, you are disconnected from yourself, and there's a reason. It's because usually there's a lot of stuff going on that's unresolved that isn't safe to access. So when we create safety in the nervous system, we now are building a deeper capacity to be able to access some of those feelings or some of that wounding that we weren't able to access before. But I think that's the part that draws a lot of people in. And I always say, like, the most important part isn't actually going in and healing all the wounding. It's learning how to embody all of the qualities that you desire to, embody. Like, if you want to be happy and have a peaceful life, well, you have to learn how to be able to hold that happiness. And, you have exact amount of capacity for the amount of good that's in your life right now. So that's a huge part of my work, is building that capacity, building that self-trust and the self-worth. So it's kind of like a few steps, like safety, capacity, courage, self-worth, self-love, self-trust, intuition. Those are all the things that I help my clients through.
Incredible. Now, I'm sure the women that are sitting there are like, wow, this sounds so fascinating. I'm so intrigued by everything that you guys have talked about today. But I'm also feeling like super fucking overwhelmed, because perhaps she's in that lack of masculine, or in that hyper overdrive of masculine, or maybe it's the feminine that she's feeling a misfiring of. Wherever she finds herself right now, she's feeling stuck. She's feeling like she's not living a life through desire. She's living a life through survival, and she's really, really struggling, just feeling overwhelmed by this whole process. What would you suggest that she focus on right now? Like, what is that one piece that she can walk away from today, knowing that if she just looks at this or works on this, she will see a positive result in her life moving forward?
Cultivating safety, I would say, would be the biggest thing. Finding pockets of safety, whether that's like taking a breath, taking a slow, intentional breath. There's so many different ways to start bringing that safety into your life. And I feel like safety is like the pathway to all of the other good things. So I feel like when we can cultivate that safety, we can get to our true essence and all the other, like, joy. Then it starts, once you feel safe, then you feel safe enough to go for things that you desire, right? So first and foremost, and a good kind of guide for that would be things that give you oxytocin. So, like taking a bath, or giving yourself a massage, or taking some slow breaths, like all of the typical, self-care kind of stuff, and really just making it your focus. Like, let me see how many times during the day I can find little pockets of safety. And then the more that you look for it, the more that you'll feel it. And to me, when I was first starting to cultivate safety, it was just taking that slow, intentional breath. And I'd be like, I feel safe. And then it started to spread.
I love that. And I feel like that is something so tangible that anybody, no matter where they find themselves in their life right now, can do. There's no additional costs. There's no big amounts of time that we need. We don't need to invest a lot of energy. It is something that we can literally start to implement today in any space that we find ourselves in. And I absolutely love that. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I know our listeners are so intrigued to find you on social media and learn all the things. So can you please let us know, if our listeners want to follow your journey, if they want to learn more, if they want to work with you, where do they go to find all of this information?
Yeah, so Instagram is my main platform, but I am on Facebook, YouTube, Threads as well. So you can pretty much find me anywhere at Creating Inner Alchemy, and I'm sure you'll be sharing the links. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to have everything below so it's clickable. And, if our listeners are driving or they're cleaning their house or doing something and they're panicked to try to write it down, don't worry. It is below in the show notes. You can click it, grab it directly. Sarah, thank you so much for being on today. I loved our conversation, and I know our listeners will have gotten so much out of today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun to chat.
You are more than welcome. And a big thank you to all of our listeners. We appreciate you being here with us today. If you loved what you heard, we'd be so honored you drop below, leave a review, catch up with us on social media, and of course, send this episode to somebody you think should hear it too. I will catch you in the next episode. Remember to go regulate yourself.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Go Regulate Yourself podcast. If you felt called out, in the best way, I would be so honored if you drop below and leave a review or share this with a friend who needs to hear it too. And remember, regulate yourself before you wreck yourself. I'll catch you in the next episode. Mwah.